See who has joined us at the desk right now. It's our good friend Rekha Basu from the Des Moines Register. Time for Rekha's Voice. I'm laughing because every time I see Bob Dylan on TV doing the commercial, I think of you, Rekha.
I know. Just, you know, I don't know how to feel because on the one hand, I think it's outrageous that he's doing these commercials. On the other hand, I'm his biggest fan. So just seeing him makes me happy, but not in that context.
Maybe he's giving it to charity. We don't know.
You think?
I don't know.
No, you can
nice
hope.
to find out. One can hope. Exactly.
Right. So what are we talking about here this morning?
Well, my goodness, I was all set to come in and talk about my column today, which is about undocumented immigrant kids who showed up at the border. And actually, they should not even be classified as undocumented because they're unaccompanied minors who showed up at the border as part of this wave of kids that were showing up beginning in 2013. And various states were either accepting them or not accepting them. Governor Branstad said Iowa will not. But it turns out there are 139 of them living in Iowa, and I got to interview some of them. I was going to talk about that, but I think this outrage that is the unfolding story about Medicaid privatization in Iowa takes precedence today. That was the subject of my Sunday column.
You know, I have a child with special needs, and this will affect us, so we've been watching this very closely.
Absolutely, and that's one of the fears, in fact, that,
now, give everyone the Reader's Digest version of this if they're not familiar with it.
Reader's Digest version is this. Back in January, it started to become clear to some state legislators through the grapevine, like word on the street, that the governor was planning to privatize the state's Medicaid program, which serves low-income people in the state. And they had to ask him about it before he was willing to acknowledge that, yes, indeed, he had a plan to privatize it, take it out of state. And it's always been under the control of state government and funded jointly by the state and federal governments for the poor. And there's been no problems with it. Well, Branstad said the costs were growing too rapidly and that money could be saved up to $51 million in the first 6 months of privatization. So that's why he was doing it. So bids were invited, and 11 were submitted, and 4 companies were chosen, and then the shoes start to fall left, right, and center. So first of all, the companies that were unsuccessful filed a lawsuit, and that is being heard currently in court, that these companies that were selected that there was nepotism involved, that there was unfair practices involved that gave them the winning bids because they had had lots of violations and claims against them. And this came up in court in the last couple of days.
Right.
So 3 of these companies, 2 of these companies combined, WellCare and United Healthcare and its subsidiaries, had 749 sanctions against them in the past 5 years. And the companies also paid more than $250 million in fines or settlements in other states regarding alleged Medicaid or Medicare fraud or mismanagement issues. Okay?
And these are some of the companies that made it through?
Yeah, these are the ones that made it through. These are 2 of the 4 that made it through. So there's a lawsuit saying that the bid process should be redone and should be voided at this point. But then here's the other shoe that drops. I mean, this is outrageous. So then they tried to discover what was the source of. There were questions raised as to whether $51 million could actually be saved. This is a $4.2 billion program, by the way, in Iowa. How could $51 million be saved in the first 6 months of the program? Well, it turns out the person who came up with that estimate said that she actually pulled it out of a hat. That, you know, experts say anywhere from 0 to 15% might be saved. And so she said, oh, I'll go to the middle number, and that's 7.5%, and that equals $51 million.
But when Branstad was asked about this, he threw it back on Democrats, saying that they had even a
right,
worse
that they
number.
passed a budget that factored that in. So, I mean, that's the thing. Democrats did pass a budget that factored in those savings based on Branstad's say-so. But it wasn't Democrats' idea. But unfortunately, they didn't do anything to stop the privatization either. They adjourned the session at that point. It was getting late in the session, so they adjourned it. So it became a done deal. So now the only way to stop this train wreck is for the federal government to step in, and which it does. It has final say. It has to authorize because it's federal funds involved, and say, no, you know, this cannot happen. This needs to be stopped. Or if this judge rules that these companies won it fraudulently by, you know, by fraudulent claims, and not disclosing that they had these claims against them. But it's just a case of outrage as far as I'm concerned, because I feel like we as taxpayers and Iowa citizens and users of Medicaid have been played. I mean, we've absolutely been played. You know, that the governor pulls out of his hat this idea that we should privatize because it's part of his agenda overall to get, you know, to get rid of, to cut back on state government and turn everything over to the private sector. But certain functions of government are really important important because they involve vulnerable people. And, you know, children with disabilities and poor people dependent on government health care are some of those vulnerable people. And this is just outrageous. How is this savings going to be achieved? I mean, obviously, private health care companies, insurance companies are in the business to make a profit. So these savings can only be achieved, if there will be savings, by cutting back on services and what they provide.
Well, it's, you know, I'm with you. This whole thing stinks to me. But, you know, if they can do things more efficiently and save money, fine. But we don't have any evidence of that.
No,
I mean,
we have
certainly
absolutely no
government
evidence.
isn't normally known for its efficiency either.
Exactly.
But-
And mind you, in 2 other instances, when the governor closed the state juvenile home, saying that, you know, those services would be turned over, and then homes for mentally disabled people, those, in both cases, judges ruled that he had done that without proper authorization, that he couldn't make these unilateral decisions.
So what's going to happen from here then?
Well, we'll see what the outcome of the court case is, and we'll see what the federal government has to say. And some state legislators have already, and by the way, state legislators, both Republican and Democratic, have complained and objected to this and are asking the federal government to now put this on hold.
Well,
this
and I know
privatization.
as a family that uses these services that it's all being delayed, and a lot of people who are providers don't know what's going to happen, so they're kind of sitting there.
So
and
have you felt any impact of it yet?
No.
Okay, and you haven't been
yet.
told anything
No.
about what's going to happen?
There's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of people saying we just don't know.
I think
And
it's
how
just,
long is that going to last?
you know, it's just awful to put consumers on the fence like this, you know, on hold and not tell you what's going
Well,
on.
and the kid. I mean, that to me, you
kid.
mess with my kid, then there's going to be a lot of trouble. you know.
Exactly. So I think this is just, I mean, this is just part, and we've talked about this whole privatization zeal before. If there's really demonstrated savings and you can show that, you know, the quality of care won't be compromised, okay, you know, let's talk about that. But to just rush it through like this, when there is no basis for your estimation of savings and no safeguards, and that these companies are apparently crooked, not disclosing stuff, then for heaven's sake, what is going on here? It's just wrong.
Yeah, obviously, check out Rekha's column in the paper, but who wrote the column that you were referencing there?
Okay, this was a story in today's paper by Jason Clayworth, who has been covering these court hearings, but my column was on Sunday.
And we've been talking about him in local Rip and Read headlines, and of course you have your column this morning or today. That's a
Exactly,
little
and
bit-
that's on the unaccompanied minors from Central America.
Right.
Okay.
There you go. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank
It is
you.